I'm Kayla, 32 female. I live in a small, cozy apartment that I've tried to make a home, nestled in a city where the rent seems to climb higher every month. By day, I'm a high school English teacher, trying to ignite a passion for literature in teenagers who would rather be watching TikToks. It's a rewarding job, but it doesn't exactly pay well. This story is about how I discovered that the family I always tried to please, the family I thought had my back, had been playing a very different game behind the scenes. A game of favorites that almost broke me, until I decided to change the rules. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, the dynamic in our family was as clear as it was unspoken. There was me, Kayla, the responsible, quiet, and academically inclined older sister. Then there was Ashley, 3 years younger, the social butterfly, the effervescent one who could charm her way out of any trouble and into anyone's heart. My parents, Robert and Linda, never used the words golden child, but they didn't have to. Their actions painted a picture so vivid it might as well have been hung in a gallery. While I was praised for my straight A's with a quiet pat on the head, Ashley was celebrated for winning most popular in her class with a lavish dinner out. While I was encouraged to get a sensible part-time job to save for a car, a brand new convertible mysteriously appeared in the driveway for Ashley's 17th birthday. A surprise from our proud parents. My father, a dentist before he retired, was a man of precision and order. He appreciated my diligence, but was utterly captivated by Ashley's sparkle. My mother, a retired nurse, was the family's emotional caretaker, but her care always seemed to be distributed unevenly. She'd spend hours helping Ashley pick out a prom dress, but would tell me my scholarship applications were something I needed to learn to handle on my own to build character. "You're the strong one, Kayla," she'd say, a phrase that I once took as a compliment but later realized was a justification. It meant, you can handle being neglected, so we can focus on Ashley. This narrative followed us into adulthood. I went to a state college on a combination of scholarships and student loans, working 2 jobs to cover my living expenses. Ashley went to a private university, and though she was supposedly on a partial scholarship, my parents frequently boasted about helping her out so she could focus on her college experience, which mostly involved her sorority and a burgeoning social media presence. After college, I pursued teaching. It was my passion, a calling to help shape young minds. The pay was modest, but the fulfillment was immense. I lived frugally, meticulously budgeting every dollar, slowly paying down my student loans and trying to build a savings account. Ashley, meanwhile, turned her popular Instagram account into a career as a lifestyle blogger. Her life, at least online, was a curated stream of boutique coffee shops, sponsored vacations, and trendy outfits. My parents were her biggest cheerleaders. They would share her posts on their own social media pages with captions like, "So proud of our little entrepreneur." They never shared anything about my teaching awards or the successful student projects I led. My life was apparently too mundane, too normal to be a source of public pride. The disparity became painfully obvious about 2 years ago. I was 30, and the transmission on my 10-year-old sedan finally gave out. The repair cost was nearly $3,000, a sum that felt like a mountain to me. I had some savings, but this would wipe out a significant portion of my emergency fund, which I was also hoping to use as a down payment on a small condo someday. Swallowing my pride, I called my parents. I explained the situation, not asking for a handout but for a short-term loan. I laid out a repayment plan, showing them my budget and how I could pay them back in 6 months. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "Kayla, honey," my dad finally said, his voice laced with that familiar tone of gentle disappointment. "We'd love to help, but things are a bit tight right now with retirement. You're so good with money, I'm sure you'll figure it out." This is a good lesson in financial responsibility. My mother echoed his sentiment, adding, "We have to be fair, sweetie. We can't just give money to one daughter and not the other." That last line stung the most, a blatant falsehood delivered with such sincerity it made me question my own sanity. I mumbled that I understood, hung up the phone, and cried out of sheer frustration and hurt. I ended up taking on extra tutoring sessions for months, working late into the evenings and on weekends, completely exhausting myself to pay for the repair. I figured it out, just as they knew I would, because I had no other choice. That experience created a new, invisible wall between us. I stopped sharing my struggles, my hopes, my financial goals. They didn't seem to notice. Our weekly phone calls became shorter, more superficial. They'd ask if everything was fine, and I'd say yes, and that was enough for them. They'd then spend the next 20 minutes regaling me with stories of Ashley's latest brand deal or her fabulous trip to Bali, all expenses paid by some skincare company. I'd listen, my stomach twisting into a tight knot of resentment, and offer a hollow, "That's great." My best friend Jenna was the only one who understood the full depth of the situation. "They're not just being unfair, Kayla. They're being cruel," she told me over coffee one day after I recounted the car incident. "Telling you they have to be fair is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Do they think you don't have eyes?" Jenna, a paralegal, was pragmatic and logical. She saw the situation not just as a family drama, but as a pattern of manipulation. "They've typecast you," she explained. "You're the reliable one, and Ashley is the shiny one. Reliable people don't need help, they just manage. Shiny things need to be polished." She was right. I was the family bedrock, the one they never had to worry about. And because they didn't have to worry, they simply didn't. They took my independence not as a strength I had built out of necessity, but as a given, a natural resource they could exploit for their own peace of mind. The bitter rage was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of my life. It was isolating, a secret I kept because saying it out loud felt like a betrayal of the family I was supposed to love unconditionally. I felt like I was going crazy, seeing this glaring inequity that everyone else in my family was either blind to or complicit in. I loved my sister, or at least, I loved the memory of the little girl I grew up with. But the woman she had become, and the role my parents had assigned us, was eroding that love, replacing it with something cold and sharp. I was drifting, emotionally untethered from the people who were supposed to be my anchor, and I had no idea that the real storm was still on the horizon. Life settled back into its predictable rhythm. I taught, I tutored, I saved. The memory of my parents' rejection over the car repair money slowly scabbed over, a scar I tried not to pick at. I focused on my goal, saving for a down payment. It was a slow, arduous process. Every extra $100 I managed to tuck away felt like a monumental victory. I cut back on everything. Takeout coffee became a rare treat, vacations were non-existent, and my wardrobe consisted of thrift store finds. My little savings account grew at a snail's pace, but it was mine. It represented my hard work, my discipline, my quiet rebellion against the narrative that I didn't need help because I could always just figure it out. My dream was modest. A small, one-bedroom condo in a safe neighborhood, a place that was truly my own, where I could build a life without the shadow of my family's conditional support looming over me. Meanwhile, Ashley's star continued to rise in the digital world. Her brand was all about aspirational living, and she played the part perfectly. She and her long-term boyfriend, a similarly image-conscious guy named Mark, were the picture of modern success. They announced their engagement via a professionally shot series of photos on a mountaintop, of course. My parents were ecstatic. The wedding planning took over our family's entire emotional landscape for the next year. My mother and Ashley spent every weekend visiting venues, tasting cakes, and trying on dresses, photos of which were promptly uploaded to Ashley's social media. My role was relegated to that of a distant but supportive observer. I was given the token title of maid of honor, but my opinions were never sought. When I gently suggested a more budget-friendly flower arrangement, my mother dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "Oh, Kayla, don't worry about the cost. This is Ashley's special day. We want everything to be perfect for her." The wedding was as extravagant as expected, held at a vineyard an hour outside the city. It was a beautiful ceremony, but I felt like a stranger watching a movie of someone else's family. I smiled for the pictures, gave a heartfelt speech that I'd spent weeks writing, and watched my parents glow with a pride I had never seen directed at me. They had paid for the majority of the lavish event, a fact my mother mentioned to anyone who would listen, beaming about how happy they were to give their little girl the wedding of her dreams. I didn't begrudge them that. A wedding was a special occasion. I understood. A few months after the wedding, Ashley and Mark announced their next big life step. They were buying a house. It was a beautiful, newly renovated 3-bedroom in a trendy suburb, the kind of place that was plastered all over Pinterest boards. It was also wildly expensive, far beyond what I thought a lifestyle blogger and her equally image-focused partner could afford. But I just assumed they had been more successful than I realized. I offered my congratulations, feeling a familiar pang of envy but pushing it down. Their life was not my life. My journey was different. The moment everything shattered happened on a random Tuesday. I had a rare day off from school for a professional development conference that got canceled at the last minute. With an unexpected free day, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a while: visit my parents unannounced for lunch. I picked up some soup from their favorite deli and drove to their quiet, manicured suburban home. I let myself in with the spare key they insisted I keep, calling out, "Mom, Dad, I brought lunch." I found my mother in the study, sitting at my father's large mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of paper. She looked up, startled, a flash of something unreadable, panic, in her eyes before it was replaced by a wide smile. "Kayla, what a wonderful surprise. I was just organizing some old files." She seemed flustered, quickly trying to shuffle the papers into a neat pile. But my eyes had already caught on the document on top. It was a bank statement, and one line item, highlighted in yellow, stood out with jarring clarity. "Wire transfer to Ashley and Mark Thompson, $75,000. I froze. $75,000. The number seemed to burn itself into my brain. It was more than twice what I had managed to save over 5 years of relentless, backbreaking work. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was a house down payment. My mother saw where I was looking. Her smile faltered. She quickly covered the statement with a folder, but it was too late. The image was seared into my memory. "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, it's nothing, sweetie, just some boring financial stuff," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. She stood up, trying to steer me toward the kitchen. "Let's have that soup, I'm starving." But I couldn't move. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed: the expensive house, the casual way they'd announced the purchase, my parents' tight finances when I needed help with my car, the phrase, "we have to be fair," echoed in my mind, a mocking, cruel ghost. $75,000, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "You gave them $75,000. My mother's face crumpled. The cheerful facade disappeared, replaced by a look of guilt and desperation. "Kayla, please." "It's not what you think, isn't it?" I pressed, the cold rage I had suppressed for years finally boiling to the surface. "You told me you were struggling. You told me you had to be fair. You let me work myself to the bone for a $3,000 car repair, and you turned around and handed my sister a down payment for a house." My father walked in then, drawn by our raised voices. He saw my face, then my mother's, and he knew instantly what had happened. His expression hardened. "This is a private family matter, Kayla." "I am family," I yelled, the sound tearing from my throat. "Or am I only family when it's convenient, when I don't need anything?" "Ashley needed the help," my father said, his tone defensive. "They're just starting out. They wanted to be in a good neighborhood to start a family. We were in a position to help our daughter." "I am your daughter too," I cried, tears of betrayal streaming down my face. "What about when I needed help? Was I not your daughter then?" "That was different," my mom whispered, wringing her hands. "You're so capable, we never have to worry about you." There it was again. The compliment that was actually a curse. My capability wasn't a source of pride for them. It was an excuse. An excuse to neglect me, to dismiss my struggles, to pour all their resources, financial and emotional, into my sister. I looked at the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and for the first time, I saw them for who they really were, not as parents, but as patrons of their favorite child. The check they wrote for Ashley wasn't just money. It was a declaration. It was a formal, notarized statement of my worth in the family, and it was zero. After the explosive discovery at my parents' house, I retreated. I didn't answer their calls, which went from concerned to pleading to annoyed. I couldn't face them. The raw wound of their betrayal was too fresh, and I knew that any conversation would devolve into them trying to justify their actions and me trying to explain a pain they were incapable of understanding. I felt a profound sense of isolation, like a faulty gear that had been ejected from the family machine. The world I thought I knew had been a lie, and I was left to grapple with the wreckage. About a week later, Ashley called, her tone breezy and cheerful as if nothing had happened. "Hey, I feel like I haven't talked to you in ages. Mom and Dad are putting together a little family brunch on Sunday to celebrate our new house. You have to come see it. It's finally starting to look like a home." I felt a surge of icy fury. Did she not know? Or worse, did she know and simply not care? "I don't think I can make it, Ash," I said, my voice flat. There was a pause. "Oh, is everything okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just busy with grading." "Kayla, don't be like that," she whined, a tone she'd perfected in childhood to get her way. "It's important to Mom and Dad. They really want everyone there. Please." The manipulation was so blatant it was almost laughable. They were using her, the unwitting or perhaps witting beneficiary of their deception, to lure me back into the fold so they could smooth things over and pretend nothing had happened. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 32 years to be the peacekeeper, wanted to give in. But the new, wounded part of me, the part that had seen the bank statement, refused. "I can't. I'll see you around," I said, and hung up before she could protest further. My resolve lasted until Saturday night. A barrage of texts from my mother, filled with guilt-laden phrases like, "We miss you so much," and "Your sister is so hurt you won't come," wore me down. Jenna, ever the voice of reason, gave me some stark advice. "Look, you can either hide from them forever, or you can go, keep your mouth shut, and gather information. Don't let them rug sweep this, but don't give them a dramatic confrontation they can use to paint you as the unstable one. Go, be a ghost." Observe. It sounded like a battle plan, and the idea of having a strategy, any strategy, felt better than stewing in my own anger. So, on Sunday, I drove to my sister's new house. It was just as lovely as the pictures, a charming craftsman with a wide porch and a perfectly landscaped yard. Walking through the front door felt like stepping onto a stage set. Everything was impeccably decorated in shades of beige and cream, looking more like a showroom than a home. My parents rushed to greet me, their smiles overly bright, their hugs too tight. "Kayla, we're so glad you came," my mother chirped, avoiding my eyes. My father gave me a stiff pat on the shoulder. "Good to see you." Ashley showed me around, pointing out the quartz countertops and the reclaimed wood floors. I murmured appreciative comments, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. The whole time, I could feel the $75,000. It was in the walls, in the expensive light fixtures, in the brand-new stainless steel appliances. The house wasn't just a house, it was a monument to my parents' favoritism. We sat down for brunch around a large farmhouse table. The conversation was painfully stilted. My parents and Ashley talked about neighborhood gossip and Mark's recent promotion, pointedly including me with questions like, "How's teaching, Kayla?" I gave one-word answers, channeling the ghost Jenna had told me to be. I was present, but I was not participating. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. They were all waiting for the other shoe to drop, for me to either start screaming or pretend everything was fine. I did neither. The slip happened during dessert. My mother was serving a cake she'd brought when Mark, Ashley's husband, started talking about their future plans. "Now that we're settled in the house, we're hoping to get the backyard landscaped next spring, maybe even put in a small pool in a few years," he said with a self-satisfied smile. Ashley chimed in, "And we'll finally have room for a nursery when the time comes." My mother clasped her hands together, her eyes shining. "Oh, that would be wonderful. We always wanted this for you." Then came the fateful words. She turned to me, a placating smile on her face, as if trying to offer me an olive branch. "And don't you worry, Kayla. When you decide to settle down and buy a place, we'll make sure to help you out the same way. The family investment account is finally replenished." The table went silent. Ashley and Mark exchanged a quick, nervous glance. My father cleared his throat and took a sudden, intense interest in the crumbs on his plate. I stared at my mother, my mind racing to process what she'd just said. "The family investment account?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My mother's face went pale. She had misspoken, and she knew it. She had revealed a piece of the puzzle I wasn't meant to see. "It's just a little something your father and I have, dear." "For investments," she stammered. But it was the word replenished that stuck with me. You don't replenish something unless it has been depleted. They hadn't just given Ashley money from a savings account. They had emptied something specifically designated as a family account to give to her. The lie was deeper and more complex than I had imagined. They hadn't been tight on funds when I needed help with my car. They had simply chosen not to give me access to family money, money that was supposedly for both of us. "So there was an account," I stated, not asking a question. "An investment account for the family, and you emptied it for Ashley's down payment." "Now, Kayla, it's more complicated than that," my father interjected, his voice firm, trying to regain control of the narrative. "It was our money, and we can do with it as we see fit." "But you called it a family account," I pushed, looking directly at my mother, who was now visibly trembling. "What was in it? And why was it only for one part of the family?" Ashley, seeing her perfect brunch imploding, finally spoke up. "Kayla, can you just stop? You're ruining this. You're just jealous because for once in your life I got something you didn't." The accusation was so childish, so wildly off the mark that it broke the spell of my rage. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt a strange, chilling clarity. They didn't get it. They never would. They lived in a completely different reality, one they had constructed to justify their own behavior. I looked at my sister, my parents, and Mark, all staring at me as if I were the problem, the source of this ugly disruption. Jenna's voice echoed in my head, "Gather information." I had my information. I stood up from the table, my napkin falling to the floor. "Thank you for brunch, Ashley. The house is lovely," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I have to go." I walked out of the house without another word, leaving them in a stunned silence. The slip of the tongue hadn't just revealed a financial detail. It had revealed the truth of their intentions. This wasn't a one-time gift. It was a calculated distribution of assets, and I had been deliberately written out of the will while I was still living. The drive home from Ashley's house was a blur. My mother's words, "the family investment account," played on a loop in my head. It wasn't just a simple gift, it was a structured financial decision. This realization shifted my perspective from pure emotional hurt to a cold, analytical curiosity. What else didn't I know? The feeling of being wronged was now coupled with a powerful need for the whole truth. The ghost at the brunch was gone. In its place was a detective. My first call was to Jenna. I recounted the conversation verbatim, focusing on the key phrases: family investment account and replenished. As a paralegal, she immediately latched onto the legal and financial implications. "Kayla, this is bigger than just a gift," she said, her voice sharp with focus. "The terminology your mom used is specific. People set up informal family accounts or formal trusts all the time. The fact that it was depleted and then replenished suggests it's an active account, not just a savings jar. This changes things." She explained that while my parents had every right to give their money to whomever they pleased, the deception was the critical part. The lie about being tight on funds was no longer a simple white lie to avoid an awkward conversation. It was a calculated misrepresentation used to deny me help while they were orchestrating a massive financial gift to my sister. "You need more information," Jenna advised. "But you can't get it from them. They'll just lie and gaslight you. You need to find a different way in." My mind immediately went to the study. My mother had been organizing old files when I walked in. What if she hadn't been organizing, but rather hiding? A plan began to form, one that felt both terrifying and necessary. I knew my parents were leaving for a week-long cruise to Alaska in 2 weeks, a trip they'd been planning for months. They always left a spare key with me in case of emergencies. This would be my window. The thought of going into their house without permission made my stomach churn with guilt, but the need for truth was stronger. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of nervous anticipation. I kept my communication with my family to a minimum, responding to texts with brief, non-committal answers. They seemed to be walking on eggshells around me, likely hoping that if they ignored the brunch incident, it would simply fade away. The day they left, my mother called me from the airport. "We're about to board, sweetie. The house is all yours to watch over. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. We love you." The cheerfulness in her voice was grating. "Have a great trip." "Love you too," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. That evening, under the cover of darkness, I drove to my parents' house. Letting myself in felt like a violation, a crossing of a line from which I could never return. The house was silent and still, filled with the ghosts of my childhood and the more recent specter of their betrayal. I went straight to the study. It was exactly as I remembered: mahogany desk, leather chairs, shelves, filled with my father's engineering textbooks and my mother's photo albums. I started with the desk. My father was meticulous, so I knew there would be a system. I went through the drawers one by one, my heart pounding in my chest. I found files for utilities, car titles, insurance policies, all the mundane paperwork of a life. In the bottom drawer, tucked away in a locked metal box, for which I found the key in my dad's pen holder, I found what I was looking for. It was a folder labeled Family and Education Trust. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't just an informal investment account. It was a formal trust, established by my paternal grandparents years ago. The documents clearly stated its purpose: to provide for the health, education, and general welfare of the descendants of David and Susan, specifically naming Kayla and Ashley as the primary beneficiaries. The trust had been funded with a significant amount of seed money and had grown substantially over the years through my father's careful management. I sat on the floor of the study, papers spread around me, and read through years of statements. The story they told was sickeningly clear. There were withdrawals for Ashley's private university tuition, for her car, for her study abroad trip to Europe, which had been more of a backpacking adventure. For me, there was nothing, not a single withdrawal. My state school tuition, paid with my loans and earnings, was a fraction of what they had spent on her education alone. The most damning evidence was from the last few months. I found the statement showing the $75,000 withdrawal, labeled distribution to Ashley Thompson for primary residence purchase. And then, I found another document, a letter from their financial advisor, dated just after my 30th birthday. It was a summary of a recent meeting with my parents. The advisor wrote, "Per our discussion, we will begin the process of dissolving the family trust and rolling the remaining assets into your personal retirement accounts. As you noted that Kayla is financially independent and Ashley will have ongoing needs as she establishes her family, you have decided this is the most prudent course of action." They weren't just giving Ashley the money. They were actively dismantling the entire structure my grandparents had put in place for both of us, based on the assumption that I didn't need it. The phrase "Kayla is financially independent" was the justification. My hard-won, painfully built independence was being used as a weapon against me, a legal rationale to disinherit me. I felt a wave of nausea. This was premeditated. It had been in the works for years. My request for help with the car repair wasn't just an inconvenient moment for them. It came while they were in the middle of this financial maneuvering. Telling me they were tight on funds was an elaborate, calculated lie to protect this secret process. I took out my phone and, with shaking hands, photographed every single document: the trust's founding papers, the statements showing the distributions to Ashley, the letter from the financial advisor, everything. It was my proof, my validation. The evidence that I wasn't crazy, that the inequality I had felt my whole life was not just a feeling, but a documented financial reality. As I sat there in the silent house, the rage I felt was different from before. It was no longer a hot, emotional outburst. It was a cold, hard, diamond-sharp fury. They had done more than just favor my sister. They had systematically diverted funds meant for my welfare, funds my own grandparents had set aside for me, while simultaneously praising me for my ability to survive without them. They had used my strength against me to justify their actions. I carefully put every paper back where I found it, locked the box, and returned the key to the pen holder. I left the house as quietly as I had entered, but I was not the same person. The daughter who had been desperate for her parents' approval was gone. In her place was a woman armed with the truth and a burning resolve to build a life so successful and so independent that they could never again use my capability as an excuse to erase me. The investigation was over. Now, the plan could begin. Leaving my parents' house that night, I felt strangely calm. The fury was still there, but it had cooled and solidified into a purpose. The pain of their betrayal was a fire, and I was going to use it as fuel, not to burn them, but to forge a new life for myself. My revenge wouldn't be about screaming matches or petty retaliation. It would be about succeeding on a scale they never imagined, on my own terms, and completely cutting them out of the equation. My independence would no longer be their excuse. It would be my weapon and my shield. The first step was a career change. I loved teaching, but I knew it would never give me the financial freedom I now craved. My salary was a slow, steady climb, but it wouldn't get me to my goal of buying a home anytime soon. I needed to pivot. I had always been good at organizing, planning, and writing, skills I used every day as a teacher. I started researching careers where these skills were highly valued and better compensated. Corporate training, instructional design, and project management all stood out. Instructional design, in particular, felt like a natural fit. It was essentially teaching, but for a corporate audience, and the earning potential was significantly higher. I spent the next few months living a double life. By day, I was Ms. Evans, the dedicated English teacher. By night and on weekends, I was a student again. I enrolled in an online certification program for instructional design, pouring every spare moment into learning the software and methodologies. I used the photos of the trust documents as my motivation. Whenever I felt exhausted or discouraged, I'd look at the picture of the $75,000 withdrawal slip and the financial advisor's letter. It was a stark reminder of what was at stake. This wasn't just about money, it was about self-worth. It was about proving that I was more than just the capable one who could be safely ignored. Jenna was my rock during this period. She helped me polish my resume, coached me through mock interviews, and was a constant source of encouragement. "You're not just building a new career, Kayla," she said one night as we were poring over job applications. "You're building an exit strategy." She was right. Every module I completed, every new skill I acquired, was a brick in the wall I was constructing between my future and their influence. I started applying for jobs a few months before the school year ended. The rejections were disheartening at first, but I kept refining my portfolio and honing my interview skills. Then, I got a call for an interview at a mid-sized tech company. The role was for a corporate learning and development specialist. It was a perfect match. The interview process was rigorous, involving multiple rounds and a project simulation. I poured everything I had into it. I drew on my decade of experience managing a classroom, creating engaging lesson plans, and communicating complex ideas. I walked out of the final interview feeling cautiously optimistic. A week later, they offered me the job. The starting salary was nearly double what I was making as a teacher. I read the offer letter 3 times, the numbers blurring through my tears. These weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and vindication. This was a number I had earned. No one had given it to me. No trust fund had been emptied for it. It was mine. I submitted my resignation to the school district at the end of the academic year. It was a bittersweet moment. I would miss my students, but I knew I was on the right path. I didn't tell my family about the new job. As far as they were concerned, I was still just a teacher, struggling along. I let them maintain their comfortable narrative. The crews had come and gone, and they had returned to their lives, seemingly oblivious to my internal revolution. Our conversations remained superficial. They never mentioned the brunch. It was as if a silent agreement had been made to pretend it never happened. This silence suited my plan perfectly. With my new salary, my financial situation transformed. I continued to live frugally, but now my savings account was growing at an astonishing rate. In just over a year at the new company, I saved more than I had in the previous 5 years combined. I worked hard, earning a reputation for being efficient, creative, and reliable. My boss was impressed, and I was given more responsibility, which came with a performance bonus that I immediately added to my down payment fund. During this time, I also worked on my emotional independence. I went to therapy to process the deep-seated pain of my family dynamics. My therapist helped me understand that their favoritism was a reflection of their own issues, not a measure of my worth. I learned to set boundaries. I stopped being the one to always call. I politely declined invitations to family events when I didn't have the emotional energy to attend. I started building a life filled with friends who supported me, hobbies that brought me joy, and a sense of self that wasn't tied to their approval. About 18 months after starting my new job, I had enough for a down payment. Not just for a small, one-bedroom condo, but for a two-bedroom townhouse in a quiet, up-and-coming neighborhood. It had a small patio for a garden and a spare room I could use as a home office. It was perfect. The mortgage pre-approval process was smooth. When the bank approved my loan, based solely on my own income and credit score, I felt a sense of pride so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I had done it. I had achieved the very thing my family had given my sister, but I had done it on my own. I found my perfect townhouse, put in an offer, and it was accepted. The entire process from the offer to closing took about a month, and I didn't tell my family a single word. My silent assent was nearing its peak. The confrontation was coming, but it wouldn't be a messy, tear-filled argument. It would be a calm, calculated demonstration of my success. I was ready to show them the life they couldn't touch. The closing on my townhouse was scheduled for the week before Thanksgiving. As the holiday approached, my mother started her campaign of calls and texts, insisting that my presence was non-negotiable. "Everyone has to be there, Kayla, it's Thanksgiving," she'd say, her voice full of forced cheer. In previous years, I might have made an excuse, but this year was different. This was the stage I had been waiting for. I agreed to come, my tone so placid and agreeable that she was audibly relieved. I spent the days leading up to the holiday moving into my new home. Jenna and a few other friends helped me, our laughter echoing in the empty rooms as we assembled furniture and unpacked boxes. With each item I put in its place, my books on the shelves, my favorite mug in the kitchen cabinet, the house felt more and more like mine. It was a sanctuary I had built for myself, a fortress of my own making. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up in my own home for the first time. The feeling was indescribable. I made coffee in my own kitchen and looked out the window at my own small patio. There was no bitterness, no rage, just a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. I arrived at my parents' house that afternoon, right on time. The scene was exactly as I'd pictured it. Ashley and Mark were there, Ashley regaling everyone with stories of her recent influencer retreat. My father was watching football, and my mother was bustling around the kitchen, a stressed but happy matriarch in her element. They all greeted me with the same superficial warmth as always. I smiled, played my part, and complimented my mother on how wonderful the house smelled. I didn't mention my new job, my new house, or anything else about my life. I was a blank slate, and their assumptions filled in the rest. They still saw me as Kayla, the struggling teacher. Dinner was served, and the conversation flowed around the usual topics. Ashley talked about her plans to renovate their master bathroom. Mark talked about his golf game. My parents asked them questions, hanging on their every word. They asked me how my school year was going, and I gave a vague but pleasant answer. "It's going well. The kids are a handful, as always," I said with a smile. It wasn't a lie. I was simply omitting the fact that my school year had ended over a year ago. The moment came after the main course, just as my mother was bringing out the pumpkin pie. It was a family tradition for my father to propose a toast before dessert. He stood up, glass of wine in hand, and began his usual speech. "I just want to say how thankful I am to have my whole family here, healthy and happy," he started, beaming at all of us. "We're so proud of our children, proud of Ashley and Mark for building such a beautiful home and life together." He raised his glass. "And proud of Kayla for her dedication to her students, to family." Everyone raised their glasses. "Hear, hear," they all murmured. I took a sip of water. When everyone had sat down, I remained standing. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of surprise and curiosity on their faces. "I'd like to make a toast as well, if that's okay," I said, my voice calm and steady. My father looked pleased. Of course, honey, go ahead. I picked up my water glass. I have a lot to be thankful for this year, too, I began, making eye contact with each person at the table. I'm thankful for the challenges that have taught me what I'm truly capable of, and I, too, have some exciting news to share. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Ashley shifted in her seat, a flicker of annoyance on her face at her spotlight being stolen. As some of you know, I've been working really hard for the past couple of years, I continued. And I'm thrilled to announce that all that hard work has paid off. I recently accepted a position as a corporate learning and development specialist at a tech firm. The work is incredibly fulfilling, and the salary has allowed me to finally achieve a long-held dream. I looked directly at my parents. Their smiles were frozen on their faces. Last week, I closed on my first home, a 2-bedroom townhouse over in the Ridgewood area. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Ashley's jaw literally fell open. Mark just stared. My father's face was a mask of disbelief, while my mother's went pale. You bought a house?" my mother stammered. "Yes," I said, a small, genuine smile finally reaching my lips. It was a long road, but I managed to save up the 20% down payment all by myself. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're really motivated. I let the words "all by myself" land with the weight they deserved. The subtext was unmistakable. My father found his voice first. "Why didn't you tell us? About the job, the house?" "To be honest," I said, my voice softening but losing none of its strength, "I learned a valuable lesson from you a few years ago. I learned that my financial independence was very important. You taught me that I was the capable one, the one who could figure things out on her own. So I did. I didn't want to bother you with the details of my journey, especially since I know how tight things can be and how important it is for you to be fair." The words tight and fair hung in the air, poisoned darts hitting their mark. My mother flinched as if she'd been struck. Ashley just stared at me, a dawning comprehension in her eyes. She was finally beginning to understand that this was about more than just a house. "So I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass high. "To independence, to building a life that you can be proud of on your own terms, and to family and the very different ways they can show their support." I took a long, slow sip of my water, my eyes never leaving theirs. No one else moved. No one drank. The Thanksgiving toast was over. I had not raised my voice. I had not cried. I had not accused them of anything outright. I had simply told them my truth, wrapped in the very language they had used to dismiss me for years. And in the deafening silence of that dining room, I knew they had heard every single word. After my toast, the festive atmosphere of the Thanksgiving dinner evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. Nobody knew what to say. Ashley was looking back and forth between me and our parents, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning anger. My father's face was flushed, a muscle twitching in his jaw. My mother looked like she was about to burst into tears. I calmly placed my water glass back on the table. "Well, I should get going," I said, my voice light and breezy, as if I hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of their dining room. "I've still got a few boxes to unpack at the new place." "Kayla, wait," my mother pleaded, her voice trembling. "We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I replied gently but firmly. "I shared my good news and now I'm heading home. It was a lovely dinner." I didn't give them a chance to argue. I gathered my purse and coat, gave a general wave to the stunned occupants of the room, and walked out the front door. The cool night air felt clean and fresh against my face. As I drove away, I didn't feel a triumphant surge of adrenaline or a bitter satisfaction. I just felt light. The weight I had been carrying for years, the anger, the resentment, the desperate need for their validation, had been lifted. I hadn't set out to destroy them, I had set out to free myself. And I had succeeded. The fallout was immediate, though it came in waves. First came the angry text from Ashley that night. "How could you ruin Thanksgiving like that? You're so selfish. You've always been jealous of me, and you finally found a way to make my life miserable." I read the messages and felt a surprising pang of pity for her. She was so embedded in the family narrative, so used to being the center of its universe, that she couldn't see the situation from any perspective but her own. She saw my success not as my achievement, but as an attack on her. I didn't reply. Next came the phone calls from my parents. My mother cried, asking how I could be so cruel, how I could twist their words and throw their help for Ashley in their faces. My father took a different approach, one of anger and indignation. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By embarrassing us in front of your sister and her husband. I let them say their piece. When they were done, I said the same thing to both of them. I only told the truth. If the truth is embarrassing, then that is something you need to reflect on, not me. I'm not interested in arguing about the past. I'm focused on my future. Then I blocked their numbers. It felt drastic, but I knew it was necessary. Any further communication would just be a toxic cycle of blame and manipulation. I needed clean air to breathe. The silence that followed was profound. Weeks turned into months. The holidays passed without any contact. My first Christmas in my new home was quiet, spent with Jenna and other friends. It was peaceful. There was no drama, no walking on eggshells, no feeling of being second best. There was just warmth and genuine affection. I realized that I had been confusing the chaos of my biological family with the comfort of a real one. I was building my own family now, one based on mutual respect and support. About 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from my father. I almost threw it away, but my curiosity got the better of me. It was not the angry, defensive letter I expected. It was short, and the tone was one of weary resignation. He wrote that my mother was devastated and that my sister refused to speak to them, blaming them for the rift I had caused. He admitted in his own stilted way that they had made mistakes. "We always saw you as the strong one," he wrote, "and we took that for granted. We thought we were helping Ashley, but we see now that we hurt you in the process. I don't know if you can forgive us, but I am sorry." I read the letter several times. The apology was there, but it still felt hollow, born more out of the inconvenience of his fractured family than genuine remorse for his actions. It was an apology aimed at fixing his own discomfort, not healing my pain. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't feel anger, but I also didn't feel a rush of forgiveness. I just felt nothing. The power they held over me was gone. Their apology, or lack thereof, no longer mattered. My peace was no longer contingent on their actions. I never replied to the letter. From what I've heard through the grapevine, my sister's relationship with my parents is strained. Her perfect life, built on their financial support, was suddenly complicated by the reality of its source. The golden child narrative had been shattered, and apparently she didn't know how to function without it. My parents are living in the quiet, lonely house they built, grappling with the consequences of their choices. As for me, my life has blossomed in ways I never thought possible. I was promoted at work. I've been traveling, something I could never afford to do before. My townhouse is my sanctuary, filled with plants, books, and the laughter of friends. Sometimes, a flicker of the old sadness will surface, the grief for the family I wish I'd had.